Welcome to Reboot with Dr. Arasi Maran. I'm your host, Dr. Arasi Maran, and the main goal of this initiative is to bring evidence-based science to you so that you can make informed choices about your health. Joining me today is Dr. Arun Kalyanasundaram. I know his last name is quite a mouthful, so he goes by K14 back in the US. Arun and I were medical school classmates, and then our paths diverged, and we met again in the US. And actually, he is also an interventional cardiologist, and we both focus on the same type of complex coronary intervention for patients who have coronary chronic total occlusions. So, today, we're not going to talk about chronic total occlusions, surprisingly, because usually when we meet, that's what we talk about. Instead, we are going to talk about Arun's dietary choices and how and why, etc., etc. So stay tuned to understand Arun's journey from a vegetarian to a vegan and why that's actually relevant in his journey as a cardiologist. Arun, welcome to the show.
Arasi, thank you for having me in your podcast. I've been really impressed by what you've done thus far, and it's truly an honor and a privilege to be part of this.
Thank you so much. Arun, after medical school, our paths diverged. Can you tell us, what happened? Where did you go?
Basically, right after med school, I left for the US, right? And so it was one thing after another, and ended up doing interventional cardiology when I was in Cleveland. And then I think I had the opportunity to scrub with one of the Japanese senseis at that time as a fellow. And it was really kind of cool because, I think it's the same story, right? For all of us.
Yes.
You go retrograde and you see this wire, the externalized wire. I'm like,
yes.
Man, that is so cool. And then kind of caught the bug. Yeah, then I was in Seattle, and then you know the rest, right? I kind of moved back a couple of years ago, et cetera, et cetera.
So Arun is living my dream, where he studied in the US now, but is back in Chennai, our hometown, where we both went to medical school, and is serving the people of Chennai and Tamil Nadu, India. So both of us, as we said, we do chronic total occlusions, which is blood vessels which have been blocked for more than 3 months. And, the way I say it, think of a tunnel which has been collapsed and there's stone and grit and everything stuck in it. And our job is to find a way and open up the tunnel. And it's a quite intense and hard procedure. We both were lucky enough to train with one of the pioneers in this field, Dr. William Lombardi in Seattle, who's now in University of Washington. For any of you who are in a high intense job and who are on a quest to be better or to get better, you should also follow his podcast, The Journey to Be Better. And truly, Bill Lombardi has been a mentor to both of us. So, a shout out to Bill Lombardi for all the things he has taught us and trying to keep us on track, I would say.
Couldn't agree more. And definitely, I think Bill has been on his own kind of journey from from being a trailblazer in the CTO space to, phenomenal operator to then transition into a great teacher, mentor. And now, I think he's figuring out the next path in life. So
True.
Definitely do listen to his podcast. I think that'd be very interesting and inspiring.
Even though the podcast E-Talk brings in different doctors, it's for everyone.
Yeah.
I think it's a great tool for anyone who just wants to manage stress, get better, how to reinvent yourself. So let's go back to this podcast, Reboot with Dr. Arasi Maran. Even through college, I think, I didn't notice it much, but when I met you in Seattle, I was truly surprised or taken aback that you were not just a vegetarian, but a total vegan. And you were like, oh, my car seats are faux leather. I don't use actual leather products. I'm like, whoa, when did this happen? Can you talk us through your journey of how you got there?
Sure. Let me start with a disclaimer, right? First, to be very clear, this is my journey. Don't want people to kind of misconstrue this whole thing as saying, hey, this is from you're trying to be preachy or whatever. So just sharing my experience.
Let me also give a disclaimer.
Right.
I'm an omnivore. Okay, I don't want to be a vegetarian or a vegan in this lifetime. So we are just
all
getting
good. Whatever
yes,
works,
there are
right?
two
Yeah.
sides to this, and we're just having a fun conversation.
Yeah, and in fact, with Bill, like going back to him, like there are times when we've actually had this conversation. So there's this one time when he and I had dinner, like this was back in Seattle, and he said, like, just looking at the plate, like, oh, just together we would make like the perfect burger, because I was having all the non-meat stuff, and he was having all the, like, the
burger meats and stuff like
anyways,
that.
getting back to this, right? I mean, I think most of us in our 20s, like, I mean, especially you've gone to a new country, you start questioning a lot of what you grew up with. Like, I mean, your roots, why do I do what I do? It's like this whole finding myself kind of thing. And so one of the things about, myself was like, okay, why am I vegetarian? Like, I mean, you question almost everything in life, and I've been through that phase too. So to me, it just seemed like a more logical thing to do was like, hey, if I'm going to do this for these reasons, let me try to go full court press on this. And incidentally, it was really challenging to give up certain food items. One of the things like, hey, from vegetarian to vegan, how is that hard, right? But you realize that behavioral change is always hard. And part of it is like, going to an area where you're a little bit like, okay, do I really want to give this up, etc. So I think finding, I found more about myself through like, through that journey. And then I also, like when I was in Cleveland Clinic, I also met this amazing person by name Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. So he's the guy, for those that don't know, he's actually not a cardiologist, although he has published quite a bit of work in, in this space. I was kind of like, wow, who is this guy? Because, so he's not a cardiologist. He used to be the head of surgery at Cleveland Clinic, and very inspiring person. So he was part of, I think, the 1956 Olympic gold medal team for the US.
Oh, wow.
So he's this tall guy who's like super inspiring and very, so he just gave one of these lectures, like why be plant-based or something. I don't remember the exact name of the talk that he gave. And I think I was the only person from the cardiology department to be attending it. And so it was a small group. And so he's like, so who are you? And when I said, I'm a fellow here in cardiology. And he was like, oh, interesting. Because he didn't expect to see someone like us to be there. I was more curious than anything.
And his topic of discussion was plant-based diet.
Yeah. He's one of, I would say, one of the leaders in that space. He actually was featured in that movie, Forks Over Knives.
Yes.
Yeah, and so he does a lot of this stuff, and his research is completely. So you have Dean Ornish, whose article, I guess in JAMA several years ago got published, which was one of the first eye openers about vegetarian diet and heart
omnivore
disease.
diet.
And then went on, so he kind of built on that, and he actually showed, I think, in some cases even reversal. So it was it was kind of like, wow, this is interesting. Let me at least look a little bit more into it. So then was the transition, I think, from a vegan diet to a more, I would say, whole food plant-based.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, actually, for me personally, I mean, it did wonders. So I was almost, if I may share this, right? Like, I think, especially those of South Asian descent, like cardiovascular disease is just like, we are
rampant.
Really. It's an epidemic, right? And we all start having these risk factors that we choose to ignore early on. So, it really did wonders for my own personal numbers. So I was like, okay, this actually works. So,
but you were a vegetarian when you started.
Yeah, but I was not a very healthy vegetarian. Like, you could be a vegetarian and or even a vegan and be a very unhealthy person, right? Like, you could, French fries is
vegetarian.
Yeah, it's vegetarian. Your soda, Coke is vegetarian,
and
you can live on pizza, French fries, pasta, and then say, hey, I'm a vegetarian. How do I get disease? Right?
Yes,
so it's not just about being vegetarian or vegan or whatever. It's about making healthy food choices. Right?
I actually, let's deep dive. It's not about the labels. Oh, I'm a vegetarian and therefore I'm eating well and therefore I should not get heart disease. It's what you eat as a vegetarian which is going to make the difference.
No, I totally agree. And the key is about not being dogmatic. It's, in fact, while, when I was in Washington, when I was in Seattle, I've given talks, sometimes to vegetarian groups, and I've had people, I kid you not, I mean, like 300 pounders. I'm like, how do you even get to 300 pounds on a
Vegetarian
plant-based diet, right?
yeah,
Or a
plant-based
vegetarian or a
diet, yeah.
vegan diet? But you can. It's not that hard. And there's like, how come I have heart disease? It's like, and then, you have to kind of break it down and go back into the basics. It's,
Yes.
hey, every time, you could, we already talked about the examples, right? You could be an unhealthy vegan. You could be a relatively very healthy omnivore or a pescatarian, etc. So
yeah. So I think we get too hung up on these labels. I think that's what irritates me. And that's why I honestly wanted to get your thought process. Just vegetarianism or a plant-based diet is not a cure-all. In the same way, the omnivore or being a carnivore or any of that is not a cure-all. There's no cookie cutter, one size fits all. And we all have to personalize based on our own needs and our own mental health needs and things like that.
Totally agree. Now, the general principles is what I think, most people hopefully should take away from this is, hey, make healthier choices. And
Yes.
oftentimes that does mean, cutting down on like, your steak and, the hardcore, the red meat kind of stuff,
Yes.
and incorporating more plants in your diet. It doesn't mean you have to give up stuff. It doesn't mean you have to go, it's not an all or none phenomenon,
Absolutely.
really.
A colorful plate.
Yep.
Yes, that's all.
And that's something that we actually do, and also should talk about my wife, who's also now really into the preventative space. She's an internal medicine doctor, as you know.
Yeah, Dr. Spurti. Yes.
And so one of the things, and it's about adding more color to your plate, right? So the more you have,
Yes.
It's not about coloring agents, to be
Yes,
clear. We're
very
talking
clear.
about like natural colors in your food plate, really.
Yes. I think the bottom line is real food. The closer it is to the original vegetable or the original meat, that's what you should be taking. Just because you're eating veggie chips, that's not really eating vegetables. And for me, it's wholesome proteins. I am a big prioritize protein over any other nutrient kind of a person. So I believe animal source of protein is a more wholesome protein. And for someone who, like, I know I can't eat large volumes, so it's a quick and easy protein based kind of a thing. And we cannot ignore or deny how we are brought up. Like,
Yeah.
you grew up a vegetarian, so it was easier for you. I grew up eating non-veg, and it's easier for me. And being conscious and be mindful about the choices you make is the bottom line.
True. So two things that I, kind of want to just emphasize on. One is you kind of touched upon it, like, talking about the mental health and how we grow up with it. So anything taken to an extreme becomes dangerous, right?
Yes, yes.
So if you start obsessing about something and saying, okay, no, I have to do this, otherwise it's not going to be good, etc., then you're ignoring one important aspect of your lifestyle, which is, hey, I got to be at peace with the choices I make, right? If you get too hung up on something and it's actually affecting other aspects, like if you're like not able to sleep because I'm like, oh my God, I ate this cookie and I just feel terrible and I feel guilty, etc. It's not worth it, right? So it's about finding balance. That's one. And the other thing is that I wanted to talk about when you talked about making choices that are
mindful.
You want to customize, right? Like, is overall, it's about getting an understanding about what are healthy choices, then figuring out what you can live with, and then making, you make one change at a time. Don't try to do it all. It's just like working out. You go progressively. You can't go from 0 to 100 in one day. So just to emphasize, less processed stuff, cut out sugars as much as you can, and sugar in any form is sugar. I mean, that's another thing. I don't know if I want to talk about it.
Actually.
Less animal-based stuff. And I'm not saying go 100%. Taking anything and frying it, deep frying it, makes it unhealthy, takes out most of the nutrients. So try to eat more real food that's less processed. I think that's the message.
I think that's
and we agree
pretty
on
much,
that, right? Yeah.
So as an omnivore, I kind of agree on it. I love my meat, so don't even get me wrong. I have to have my chicken and my fish and maybe occasionally red meat or something like that, but I'm very conscious about it. So it's mostly, if I have to describe my plate, I did not eat like this. I've I have shared my story in the past. I was completely a meat eater. I mean, I was such a picky eater. My mother, I don't know, struggled to feed me. I used to have yogurt, rice, and chicken. Yogurt, rice, and chicken. I think pretty much up till the age of 17, I was just a yogurt and rice person. Like, I mean, yogurt, rice, chicken person. Then I come to medical school. Third year, first year in when we were studying was anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. Then in our second year, we start pathology. Okay, and in pathology, colon cancer, and they talk about how a low fiber diet causes colon cancer. And guess what I did? I didn't go eat vegetables. I just got psyllium fiber supplementation and ate that because I was so against eating vegetables, and and it was literally. I realized how ridiculous I was. That I'm a doctor, I'm practicing medicine, blah blah blah. It was then I was like, okay, I have to eat. So it was more or less a mindset change for me, because I started identifying myself as a person who does not eat vegetables. And that became my identity. So I had to be like, it's okay. I will not die. It's good for me, And then, of course, I got pregnant. And of course, every woman's brain changes when she is carrying another human in her body. I was like, for the sake of the greater good, I have to start eating vegetables. And now I actually enjoy a good salad. And I actually enjoy, my plate is mostly vegetables, followed by protein, and then just a little bit of carbs to, I think, and healthy fats too. I mean, I still can use a lot of avocado and a lot of olive oil, a lot of our good old ghee, all of that. And so it's a balanced meal. It's not, I'm completely avoiding one and, overdoing on the other or something like that.
I mean, several interesting things, right? Like, I think our taste buds do adapt over time. I still remember, I mean, I was actually 15 when I went to the US first for 3 months and for a program. So when I was there, I was a vegetarian, right?
Uh-huh.
And they'd be like, oh yeah, sure, we'd give you vegetable. And it's usually like some steamed vegetables or salad. And again, growing up in India, I was not used to eating salad. I'm like, no, I want it cooked, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, how do people eat this? But now, of course, like, even as you were describing avocado, I was like, man, I really miss good avocado and this and that you used to get in the West Coast, right? It's kind of hard to get it in India. But so yeah, your taste buds adapt over time, the first thing. And the second thing actually that I wanted to talk to you about was also about protein. Yeah, you're right. Like, it's easier to fulfill your protein needs when you're, if it comes from an animal source. With plant sources, you do have to be a little bit more, I mean, you have to like really broaden what you eat so that you get all the essential amino acids. If you want, so definitely you have to incorporate legumes, you have to incorporate your pulses, soya, you have to have nuts, seeds.
Yeah. I forgot about nuts, yes.
Yeah, I mean, green leafy vegetables, tofu. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in that. Like, and the reason is if you say, hey, I'm only going to get my protein from dal, which is like, an Indian pulse, like the lentils, right? You're going to miss out on certain things. So you have to be a little bit more creative. You have to do more homework if you want it to be all plant-based.
Yeah.
So yeah, the convenience factor, I did want to say, yes, I agree with that, but it's still doable.
Yes.
We just have to work it out.
So how are you getting your protein source
Just from
in
what
Chennai,
I said.
like in India? Like,
you get everything in India.
you get everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
everything that's
course.
mentioned now.
Yes.
Like things like avocado, etc.
Yes.
It might not be as good. I mean, like my kids all miss blueberries. And
Yeah,
like,
sure.
The raspberries that you get.
But it's also locally sourced food is always better. Eat closer to your environment is always better too.
Going back to what you said, they grew up with those things. So for them, that's like, okay, give me my comfort stuff. So yeah, so that part is challenging, I think, especially for the kids. But you have other stuff here. Yes. I mean, like, your mango season, and you have all the tropical fruits and everything. So yeah.
So Arun, I still remember in our first CTO summit or something like that, I ran into you in the gym when we both, CTO summit is a summit for, people who are interested in learning the chronic total occlusion opening procedure. Happens once a year in New York. I mean, what an amazing learning experience that is always, right? And I ran into your gym, and I think that was the first time I saw you with those cut sleeves, and I was like, Arun has got muscles. And I know it's almost like a little stereotype in my mind that people who are vegetarian or vegan are not going to be muscular. I did do that, so I shouldn't have done that. But I was like, okay. And you were actually jumping on this high plank, and I was like, huh, okay, all right. So how do you build your muscles as a plant-based eater?
It is more challenging, like to get enough proteins, right? I mean, roughly, right? I mean, most of us say, I don't know what you recommend, to your viewers, but in general, I would say, like, for the average person, 0.8 to 1
Yes, that's
gram
pretty
per
much the
kilo.
same thing.
And if you want to build muscle, right,
Go up to
it's 1.5 to like almost
yeah,
2
2.
grams per kilo. So getting all that from plant-based stuff is hard, but I try to get it. You just have to, like I said, you have to plan it out a little bit more. That's the first thing. The second thing is, one thing is about protein. The other thing is also about, like, how do you build up to it? There was this, oh God, I'm blanking out of the name of this movie that came out where they had
The
all
twin
these
study?
ultra athletes. No, we'll talk about the
Oh,
twin
I
study.
know. Yes. It's on Netflix.
Yeah,
And
so
the ultra athletes did, we
they
were
actually
all
went all
marathoners and
plant-based. I mean, like, the guys
Yes.
that did the super heavyweights.
Yes,
and
yes,
like,
I forget that.
And there have been actually studies and like at least anecdotal stuff where we know that even like, top athletes, for them to enhance their performance, do go on a plant-based stuff. So, I mean, I honestly don't know the biology behind how that works, but hey, it's doable. So it's kind of a myth saying, oh, you have to be a carnivore or an omnivore for you to like really pack on muscles. And the other thing I also tell people quite a bit is that, having a six-pack is very different than having functional fitness.
Yes.
I think,
That's a beautiful point, Arun.
for us in our I think, in our 40s, well,
It's okay. They know. I
they
have
know, sorry.
talked about it
So I
quite a
was
few
like, I was going to
times.
say for me, and then I was like, I'm including you too, but like we said,
We both are
classmates.
classmates.
So yeah, so it's really important, right? I mean, our muscle mass starts going down, etc.
Yes.
So for us to have functional
Fitness,
fitness,
yes.
for us to ensure that our joints are still like good and we don't have injury and bone mass, there's like this whole host of other things that we should also be focusing on as we get older, because the rate of decline is going to be faster unless you do strength training, etc., to offset that. So it's super important to do it.
So, are you taking any protein supplements, Arun, to maintain your protein requirements?
I have.
Okay.
There are times when I'm like, okay, and in the US you get like really.
Yeah,
Again, I'm not
plant-based
endorsing
protein.
any brand,
Yeah,
but
I
like it's like you can get Orgain, this, that, whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to get.
Yeah.
They are available here, but like I generally try to get it from food.
Okay. Which is, I'm a big believer of that as well.
There was a time when I was doing it, which is when, so I experiment a lot. Okay.
Of
So I
course.
do a lot of crazy stuff, and some of it might be like, off the reservation. But so there was this time when I was truly doing an OMAD diet, and I was trying to gain weight. And that was really hard. Because
How is that? That sounds like an
Doesn't work.
oxymoron. Because one
work.
OMAD is one meal a day,
yeah.
and people use that for losing weight, losing fat.
So I did it for a specific
Oh,
reason,
God,
right?
Arun.
So there's this whole thing. So I somehow believe in this theory. Okay, I'm not making this up, but there's some data for that. The less you eat, the less caloric intake
Yes,
you have,
it's-
your longevity
That's
is inversely
proven.
correlated.
That's
Yeah.
totally proven.
So along the same lines, right?
Okay.
And there's also like some data
Uh-huh.
that eating, like time-restricted eating,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I believe in that as well.
Might actually have some benefits on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing it more for the health benefits, not to lose weight. And I was trying to like still.
Arun, if you lose more weight, you will disappear. So,
So no, I
please,
have actually.
I have.
Okay, for the record, constructively, I have gained weight. So that's about like 10 to 12 pounds over the last several months.
Yes.
Intentionally, and most of it is muscle mass, not.
That's
fat.
awesome.
Okay, so.
Because for those who can see, you can see Arun now, and imagine Arun 10 to 12 pounds lighter. It was a little bit scary and a little bit traumatic.
Yeah, especially for people that have seen me.
Yeah,
during
because
college.
after he's moved to India, I see him most of the time in conferences when he comes to America, and I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you dying? Do you have cancer? And I was not the only person. He was asked this question by multiple people, which validates my observation.
It's all
That's all
good.
I'm going to say.
No judgments here. It's all good. Love your body shape. Okay.
No body shaming.
But like,
but you were, as you said, you were in a journey. You were trying to figure out what works for you.
so at that time, supplements were needed because I was just not getting enough calories. And if you, fundamentally, like when you're trying to lose weight, you need a calorie deficit. If you're trying to gain weight, you should have a
positive balance.
Yeah. So the physics doesn't work.
The math
other way,
was not
right? So
working.
yeah. So you have to so I was just not getting in enough. So yeah, at that time. But in general, so now I still two other things that I want to touch upon is, so I don't know, you kind of did intermittent fasting for a while.
I still kind of do intermittent fasting.
Because I think, and it does have, besides weight loss, it does have other beneficial effects.
Mental clarity. I went through the whole spectrum. I did go into a ketogenic process, and it worked really well for me. I'm not endorsing it. I think of it as a research tool. I had such terrible sugar addiction. I'm a chocolate addict. There is no, I can have one piece of chocolate and walk away from it. So I had to abstain from it. And I did the ketogenic diet for about 6 months, like really hardcore. I was measuring my finger sticks, ketones, everything. It gave me amazing clarity. I was off the sugar roller coaster. It did great things to the way I looked, the way I felt, my gut health.
Right.
So but the thing is, unless you are hardcore all the time, you cannot maintain ketosis. So how do you transition from ketosis to a normal diet? You can't go from eating no carbs to all the carbs. You'll be sitting in the bathroom. So I transitioned to low carb, and then I transitioned to one meal a day, and that was a great way. I honestly loved one meal a day, but I was not. It was convenient. I have to address the convenience point. I'm in the morning. I'll have my coffee, black coffee with the MCT oil, blend it together, or ghee, or number nahi, it's so good. I'll blend it in my coffee, and then I won't eat till 5 o'clock. So the food chatter went away from my brain, which is very important. I'm not hungry. I'm not thinking about food. I was so productive. And then I'll come back in the evening, have dinner, relax, chill, hang out with the family. So it was very convenient.
Yeah. For us in the hospital, I was like, what do you mean lunchtime? Why?
Yes.
You don't need lunch? I'm like, you don't need lunch. It's pretty good. Skip breakfast, have black coffee. I was just having black coffee minus the ghee, right? So that was very convenient. But again, I couldn't gain weight on that. I had to kind of come off that. But I still kind of wanted to also emphasize that I think for those people that are trying to lose weight, one is the kind of foods you eat. Obviously that has health benefits.
Obviously.
Also, when you eat, it really matters. So if you can actually have, let's say, an 8-hour window, etc., because ultimately you end up consuming less calories.
Yeah.
There was a study that actually came out that said, well, time-restricted eating versus calorie restriction. End of the day, you're still restricting calories because you're not hogging all the time.
Yes.
So I think it still works. So I think that's one other way to kind of go about that. And since we wanted to talk a lot on quote unquote a plant-based diet and the effects on health, over time, right? One of the things that I would say is that definitely from a cardiovascular standpoint, it is one of the healthier options, right?
Yes.
Whether, and again, people once again get too hung up on the semantics,
labels,
right?
and the semantics.
Oh, is it a Mediterranean diet? Is it okay? Should I? It's like, okay, overall, I think the message is, hey, more fiber, more plants, less processed, less sugar. It's
good
proteins,
prioritize proteins, and healthy fats.
Yeah, and healthy fats, exactly. So and I think if you look at all the healthy diets, right? The Mediterranean diet or a whole food plant-based diet,
yes.
etc. I think the fundamental messaging
is
very
the DASH
similar.
diet, the autoimmune protocol. It's all the same thing wrapped up in different wrapping papers.
Oh, but it's amazing, and this is where I have a lot of respect for marketing, etc. It's like, oh, people love it. Like, it's like, okay, what is this one thing that I can do that will change my life? I mean, the bad and the sad truth is there is no one thing you can do
There's
there's
no
no magic pill.
There's no magic pill. Absolutely.
But people love it. Like,
people love it, yes.
And but I think partly it's also about, like, I mean, the anti-inflammatory diet. So I don't know if you've been following the Indian news stuff.
Yes, there are a couple of actresses.
Yeah,
who have,
so there was this
Yes,
endorsement,
yes,
and
yes.
then it just went like it was trending everywhere, and everyone wanted to. And like, I mean, I got like calls saying, "Can you please talk about this anti-inflammatory diet?" And I was like, okay, I want a diet that's customized for me. I'm like, sure, I can charge an arm and a leg and try to do something for you, but you don't really need it. Just go back to the basics. But it's nice. Like, I think sometimes the messaging is really important.
True. I mean, messaging is everything. Absolutely. We can sit here and talk about eating healthy, but if we don't define what's healthy,
right?
we are just putting the onus on the patient or the other person to figure out what's healthy. So breaking it down, giving rough guidelines is great. But I also don't like micromanaging. I cannot micromanage every aspect of your life. And at the same time, it's not just a diet package. It's you have to move. You need to be mobile.
Right.
You need to sleep. You need to manage your stress, and you need to manage your emotion. You cannot have terrible habits like smoking or drinking every day or something like that. And you need to be happy. You need to do things which gives you joy and purpose in life.
I think you pretty much hit on all the pillars of lifestyle, right? I mean, the along with the happiness thing, I think the one thing that people are increasingly realizing these days is social connections.
Yes.
Right? So just having meaningful conversations, having friends that you can chill out with, etc. So yeah, I mean, this diet is one component of a lot of things that you need to do if you really want to optimize your health.
Absolutely. I mean, wasn't there a recent study? I had Jeevan Nedunjarian, who's one of the top tennis players. He's number 64 in the ATP ratings. And he was talking about how he loved tennis, because it brought him closer to other people. And I mentioned the recent study which came out where they found partner sports such as tennis, pickleball, badminton, all of that. People who participated in those sports lived longer.
Yeah.
Only it's duh. Do you really need a study to tell you that? But it validates what we think is actually true.
And I sometimes think that about the CTO community. Okay, shout out to what we do. So, but like, no, but genuinely, right? Like when I left, so there's this Dr. Patrick Whitlow, right, who used to be at the clinic. It was no more. So he was one of Bill's mentors. So when I first went up there, he said, "Oh, tell Bill, and so Bill was like, "Oh, your Pat's fellow, I got to take it." This was when he was in Bellingham. So I actually told Pat this when I left. I'm like, I don't really know if I like hanging out with you and the whole thing, or if I actually like CTOs. I don't really know. It's just a lot of fun being with you. Then like the CTO community really, I think,
the CTO community. Not that we are biased, but among the cardiology or the interventional cardiology silos, CTO community
it's a fun gang, and we look out for each other.
We look out for it because we do such crazy, hard stuff, which only we know what it is to be in the space, and then and we help each other out. Yeah. There's no other community where this kind of support system exists. I mean, for example, let's say there's like an unsaid rule. If it is an emergency call, otherwise just text message. So if I get a FaceTime thing from any of my friends, I take it, whatever time it is, because I know they are FaceTiming me because something is happening and they need help. Like, which other space kind of has this? Seriously. So I think CT operators are fun and we are cool. So we talked about your journey of the diet and the whole pillars of lifestyle medicine. But I still want to bring it back to you. Since you are a vegan, do you actually take supplements?
So there are certain things that you should, right? Especially if you're hardcore, if you're not taking anything from an animal. So you should, B12, folate, and overall, like, I think vitamin D is like every patient.
Yes, absolutely.
Vegetarian, non-vegetarian, whatever label you want to put them in. Like in India, especially, like vitamin D levels are terribly low. So do that, and also zinc.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I take a multivitamin. Definitely a B12 supplement.
Yeah, for that for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
You know, I was recently talking about someone with a stroke neurologist, Dr. Sivarajan, who heads the stroke unit in Kaveri Hospital, and he was telling me how there are a lot of vegan students and vegan people who are very young who had very high levels of homocysteine.
Because your B12 folate
For the
level intake is
deficiency, yeah, so low.
yeah.
So it's very important if you are a hardcore vegan to be on that. And there are so many studies. Again, I've said that we South Asians don't make vitamin D in our system, and therefore we need that supplementation
And
as
that
well.
for those non-medical personnel, so low vitamin D again correlates with cardiovascular risk. So just something that you might want to be cognizant of.
And the bone health also, calcium metabolism, everything. So
So yeah, it's all about the no, yeah. You should truthfully. But by the way, I just probably in the last 2 years is when I came across this. One of the most significant predictors of longevity is your quad strength. Yeah, I'm like, okay.
Interesting. I thought it was a grip strength.
They talk about grip strength, VO2 max.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
someone's like, I'm like, interesting.
strength.
But I mean, overall, like, I think the take home was, I mean, whether it's your quads or whatever. It's not
Oh,
one
I know
muscle
where this is
defines it,
coming
like,
from.
yeah.
I heard this podcast too. Are you talking about Peter Attia's podcast?
No, I actually saw this in a written thing somewhere.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, where he talks about the grip strength as being one of the things. And then he got a bunch of messages where people were just getting those grip machines and then just focusing. I'm like, that is so not the point of what he was trying to make.
But do you realize that when we break down stuff and talk about this, so people are just going to start working on their quads, and I'm like, no. The idea is like, hey, this is one measure of your overall
health.
musculoskeletal
Yes,
health,
yes.
perhaps, right? Like,
Yes.
so you need to. It's all together. But there are people. There is a big movement of like biohackers, etc. They'd be like, okay. So sometimes correlation doesn't equal causation, and they
Yes.
think like, okay, because this correlates, if I can fix this particular thing, it's going to have an positive outcome.
Effect, yeah.
Doesn't work like that. I mean, at least it need not work like that.
Yes.
Let me kind of say that.
I think, we can reiterate the point which you made, a six-pack, or prioritize don't prioritize six-pack, but prioritize functional fitness. I think that is the thing. I mean, for right now, in my mind, I am working this hard, or I am training now for the 80-year-old Arasi.
Yep.
Okay, the 48-year-old Arasi is okay, but the 80-year-old Arasi better be happy with what the 48-year-old Arasi did for herself.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think and for if there are kids that are watching it in South Asia, and maybe it's happening more these days, like back in the day when we grew up, the nerds were all cool. Like no one cared about like sports and athletics, etc. Or most of us
did. We even work out during our medical school days? Absolutely, I did not work out.
I don't think. Yeah. No, I was actually very impressed when you said at 18 you actually colon cancer correlates with. I don't even think I was thinking about all that. Right?
Was so bad, Arun. It was terrible. Like seriously, my parents were just so desperate. They just said, "Okay, fine,
do something."
Do something." At least they were like, "Okay, protein is going in the form of yogurt and chicken, that's enough. Let her just move on with life," and things like that. In general, what is your training protocol?
So yeah, I mean, and again, I've experimented a lot. So I used to do a lot more aerobic stuff. I think in the last 3-4 years, also because I wanted to like gain some muscle mass, I've been doing more strength training. I've done a fair bit of yoga.
Okay. Good.
So yeah, I mean, I mix and match. I get bored. That's the other thing. It's like after a while, I'm like, I want to do something else. So I think there's good stuff in every kind of exercise that you do, whether you're talking about HIIT or some days I feel like running, I just do it. I hate sounding, like this, but like sometimes you just have to listen to your body. Like there are times when I feel like I want to do something, I just do it.
Just do it. I think this getting bored very quickly falls under interventional cardiologist and especially the CTO operator mindset. We're like, okay, this is not working, move on to the next one. And we just like quickly switch. We switch strategies. That's what we do. All right, Arun, I think we're coming close to the end of our discussion. We totally went off script. We talked about whatever we thought was important, and I hope the audience also finds it entertaining and informative. Any closing remarks from you?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think most of us, right? are not taking enough fruits and vegetables. I mean, the recommendation, AHA-ACC, is like 4 to 5, right? Most of us don't. So I would say definitely, as in this new year, like, something that you can do is like, set yourself a goal that you know you can achieve, right? Don't set yourself up to fail. So just say, okay, I'm going to increase one portion. I'm going to cut down one unhealthy meal with a plant-based meal, etc. So make some changes that we know would be good for you. And overall, if you are getting your, dietary needs met by a plethora of food sources, you don't have to worry so much about supplementation, etc. But just make small changes that are meaningful.
Yes, absolutely. With that, Arun, thank you so much for taking time and chatting with me. It was a fun conversation.
Arasi, was fun as always.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found us valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast app. And also, please consider leaving us a rating or a review, as that helps others find the podcast too. I hope you have a great week ahead.